I guess my first question is, it's a very broad question, but what is going on? Because Burma wasn't really in the news very much. And then I think starting on February 1st, um, now Burma is back in the news. And we use the terms Burma, Myanmar, and which of these terms do you prefer?
Burma will be fine.
Okay, so we'll just
Yes.
use that term Burma. But just to get started, what is the general story? What's been happening in Burma since I think the beginning of February 2021?
So what happened was, the military, they took over the country on the 1st of February. And the main reason they were saying that because of the election fraud, the 2020 November election. So early morning, February 1st, they detaining all the democratically elected, politicians and parliament members, all of them. They detained them until now. So that's when it started. The military
Yeah.
coup took over the country.
So the military claimed that there was fraud in the election of 2020, and therefore, as in response to that fraud, then they arrest political leaders. The best known political leader is Aung San Suu Kyi. Is that right?
Yes, that's
Who,
correct.
who once again is imprisoned. Okay, so that explains the situation, or that gives us the basic background, the reason the military gave for the coup, and that's kind of the basic background. But what I want to do is shift to Karen State, because we're reading these reports from the Free Burma Rangers about Karen villages are being bombed, Karen high schools being destroyed. The number I have here is, as of early April 2021, 20,000 people, 20,000 Karen are displaced and living in the jungles. The Karen military is improving its roads into Karen State. For the very first time, it's been 20 years since Karen jets have bombed. I'm sorry, since Burmese Army jets have bombed Karen villages. And these airstrikes are taking place at night. So you've got what's happening in the city, but what's going on in Karen State? Why is the government bombing Karen villages? Why is the government destroying Karen high schools? Why is it launching mortar rounds into Karen villages? What is that all about?
The conflict between the Karen ethnic group and the, between the Burmese military regime has been going on since 1949. So it's been a little over 7 decades. And the main problem is the military. They want to control the all of the ethnic lands in Burma. But the ethnic group, they want, their freedom and their self-determinations, and they want to, rule their own lands. So, that's why, the conflict is going on and nonstop. There's from time to time, they have a ceasefire agreement, but it didn't last for a very long time. And then, the fighting start again, and the struggle for peace continue. So that's the reason, the conflict between the Karen and the Burmese army.
Yeah. And so you're saying that this has been going on basically since 1949.
Yes.
And so do you think that the military government now is using the coup and using what's happening in Yangon as cover to justify heightened military action against the Karen now?
Yes,
Yeah.
that's absolutely right.
Yeah. Um, does that division because 1949, that's not long after the Second World War. Do you know, just a historical question, is that division, does that have any roots in the Second World War?
The Karen were, very strong allies to British, to Britain. And so, that's where the, all these madness started. And then the Burmese, they're like playing all kind of tricks. Sometimes they siding with the British and sometimes they sided with the Japanese. So, but the Karen has been, very loyalty to the, only to the Western country, like, United Kingdom. So since then, the conflict between the Karen and Burmese had started.
Oh, so even during that time, you saw this division.
Yes. Yeah, that's according to, what I heard from the older folks.
Yeah. Have you heard from people living back in Burma?
Right now, folks that live by the border, like in refugee camp, they have a connection, but folks in Burma, they don't have a connection. All the internet were being cut off and, the phone lines, and they have a very poor connection. They do have a connection, but it's very poor. So, it's we don't really get a chance to talk or communicate very much
Yeah.
since the coup happened.
You're not able to communicate with people inside Burma. What have you heard from people from Burmese, from Karen, who have moved from Burma into Thailand, into refugee camps in Thailand? What have you heard from them?
So you're asking the Burmese that run into the Karen territory in like Thai-Burma border?
Yeah. What have you talked to any of those refugees or to people
Yeah.
who are in that area?
So right now, just the Karen, we have over 10,000 IDP, internally displaced people. They are, hiding somewhere in Thai-Burma border, the jungle area. They can't cross to Thailand side because the Thai government wouldn't, accept them or allow them to cross.
Oh, wow.
So that's why they have to hide it somewhere there, in the jungle, in the cave, and it's very difficult situation for them right now, especially it's a raining season. So it's a they are in extremely hard situation.
Yeah, so you have Karen then who have been displaced from their villages in Burma. They
Mhm.
can't get into Thailand, which borders Burma to the east. At the same time, what I read from the Free Burma Rangers is they're not able to take care of their crops. And so that means there's going to be a food shortage in the future.
Yes, that's absolutely right.
So you said that historically during the Second World War, the Karen had a strong alliance with the British. Who can the Karen people look to today to help them? Of course, we've mentioned, several times the Free Burma Rangers, but that's a very small organization that's not able to do a whole lot. It's a very important group, and there are other groups like that. But who can the Karen look to today for help?
That's a good question. The future of the Karen right now, I strongly believe that is depend upon the individual, the Karen people, because this has been going on for more than 70 years, and nobody, no other country can able to help settle the situation. So right now, a lot of us are spreading all around the world. So as an individual like me, and some others that live in like the third country, that's what we call it, because we once lived in Burma and crossed to Thailand. That was our second country, and like a United States, Australia, Norway, you name it. Those country are the third country for the Karen people. So yeah, it's it's depend upon the to the individual Korean people to determine for the future of their freedom and, self-determination.
Do you think it's I mean, I'm guessing from the point of view of the Burmese government, when Karen leave Burma and then go to Australia or Norway or to the United States, from the point of view of the Burmese government, that's probably fine, right? Because these people are leaving the country.
Yeah, another thing is the Burmese military, their main target, their main goal is to wipe out all the ethnic people out of the region because they want to dominate the whole lands. As you see with the Rohingya situation, their main goal is to kill all of them, genocides.
Yeah.
And it's happened with the Korean long before, but you didn't heard that on the news. But when it's happened to Rohingya, people start to realize how brutal and how aggressive this regime is.
Why don't you think, you're right, when the news of the Rohingya, or, the pronunciation we sometimes hear also is the Rohingya, when that really came into the news several years ago, that was a major news story. But as you've said, the same kind of thing against the Karen and other ethnic groups has been going on for decades. But there are some countries in the world where you've got these kinds of problems, and the international community responds very strongly. But for some reason, this in Burma just seems to keep going on and on and on and on without resolution. Why do you think that is?
I'm glad that you bring up the good points.
Yeah.
I know that a lot of people, like in United States, they wondering the same thing. Why is that? Some people even asked me personally, and I told them that the situation in Burma is completely different than the other country because, this regime, they were strongly backed by the China and Russia. So they know that, when they do something, those two major countries will, support them and they can get away with anything. So that's why they are taking advantage of that. Yeah, that's why it's been going on for this long and never stop.
So you're saying that the Burmese government, the military, feels emboldened because it knows it has the general support of China and Russia.
Yes.
Yeah.
Even, they are part of the United Nations. Let's say they were brought to, International Criminal Court or something, Russia and China, they will do something to rescue these regime, out of that situation. So that's why the regime know this very well, and then they keep playing this game for a long time. Yeah, they got all kind of support, the weapon, the militarily, all kind of support. So they receive from China and Russia.
You have family there in Karen State still?
I do have a family and also in the city in Burma. So I haven't, get a chance to be able to connect with them. Because of the, the internet connection and the Wi-Fi, they block everything. So.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
What has your personal reaction been? Because, how old were you when you left Burma yourself?
When I came here, I was 16. So I left Burma when I was around 13, and I was in refugee camp for about 2.5 years. So yeah, I basically been through, all of these difficult situations myself.
So you have those memories, and then, we're looking at what's happening in Burma now. And to me, of course, I haven't been to Burma. I've been to Thailand next door, and I've been to other countries in that area, but I've never been to Burma. So for me, this is kind of, it's an idea. For you, it's real. It's your first language, your culture, and that. And so when you read news from Burma, when you read about what's happening in Karen State, when you read reports from groups like the Free Burma Rangers, you know what that's all about. You know what those villages look like. You know all of that.
Yes.
And you know that all of this is happening. But you live in the United States, and Americans are they have their own concerns. What is that like for you? I guess I'm asking, your own sort of personal state of mind, that you've got an ongoing problem in Burma that's become more difficult lately. And a lot of people's lives are being destroyed. And then here in the United States, we've got our own preoccupations. What has it been like for you personally, sort of, living in these two worlds?
A lot of people, they were upset with the United States right now. When I say a lot of people, not only the Karen, other ethnic groups in Burma, and like other nations leaders, the world leaders, because the United States is not acting or doing anything. But in my humble opinions, every nation has the rights to put their citizen and their interests first. Right now, we have a lot of problem, not a small problem, tremendous problem in the United States. So I think, they need to focus on that instead of, babysitting and taking care of other problem across the sea. So, I don't blame United States. Some people, they might be unhappy and blame, but to me, in my humble opinion, they has a right to take care of their problem first before they, go and helping everybody around the world.
Yeah. Well, so that brings me back then to something you were saying a minute ago, and that is that, you think the Karen people themselves need to take care of this problem,
Yes.
find some resolution. How can they do that? As you've said, a lot of Karen are nowhere near Burma. They're in Australia, they're in the States, they're in Canada. You said there are Karen immigrants in Norway as well. There are many thousands of Karen in refugee camps in Thailand. How, if I pinned the star on you and said, okay, now you are in charge of the Karen organization, whatever, to respond. How can the Karen people respond when so many of them are scattered all around the world?
So my advice to Karen folks all around the world that are living in the, developed country like United States and other countries, the main things that we need to do is to do more advocacy, to make our voice loud and clear, to hear loud and clear. So, if we keep doing that, I'm sure eventually one day this regime will hand over their powers to the people. Speaking of the advocacy, some people are, very hesitated to participate, and I can understand that because I myself sometimes I feel hesitate because I have a family back home. Mm-hmm. You advocate here, and they see you on the TV or on the social media. They're gonna find out, if this guy has a family, back home or not. If we do have a family, they're gonna, go after your family over there. So that's why that's another problem also, for some people. So I understand. So that's why, advocate, to advocate, it is a great cause for some of the people here. So I greatly respect the folks that, leading like a demonstration and like a peaceful protest here. So because it's a great cause for every one of us,
You're saying,
especially, people that have a family and, relatives back home in Burma.
yeah. So you're saying that someone who does something like this, has a conversation like this, then of course the Burmese government can see this,
Oh yeah, of course, big
identify
time.
that person, and then identify that person's relatives, and there can be problems.
Yeah. When you do things like that, you're automatically on their blacklist.
Yeah. Wow. What has the response in the Karen community here been? I'm speaking to, well, we're actually both in northwestern Arkansas, where there's actually a fairly sizable Karen population. What are folks within the Karen community here in the United States, in this region, what sort of things are they saying?
Very concerned, very upset, and very depressed.
Hmm. Depressed because it feels like this problem is never going to be fixed.
Yeah, they depressed because they see the, picture of the school and villages got bombed and, a dead body, all kind of stuff. So that's why they are very upset and, very depressed. But,
Yeah.
the advocacy is still going on in
Yeah.
every state. So
Yeah. Is ultimately the goal an independent country? An independent country for the Karen?
for the Karen, that's the dream of the majority of the Karen people. The Karen people, they want their, independent lands, just like, the Jewish state, the Israel.
They want an independent state. Wow.
Yeah, because we are not a small people. A lot of people keep referring Karen as the minority in Burma, but actually Karen were the first group to arrive into Burma. So, there was no other ethnic group in Burma when the Karen first arrived there. The Karen people came all the way from the Mongolia, and then they crossed China and then into Burma, and from Burma spreading everywhere, like Thailand and the neighboring country.
Yeah.
So that's the dream of the Karen people. So that's why they keep fighting against these brutal and aggressive regime for a long, long time.
Yeah. Yeah. Roughly how many Karen are there? What's the size of the Karen population?
I will say, all include like worldwide, close to 10 million.
Wow.
Yes.
Wow.
Maybe more. I'm not sure. Yeah, but 10 million approximately.
Have you, I think this might be the last question. Have you had any thoughts about, has it gone through your mind that you would want to go back?
That I'm still thinking because, with what is going on, it's not, very, good situation. But I always have in my mind that, we have to step out of our comfort zone, when the good Lord, tell us to do so. So yeah, even though we are here, our hearts and our thoughts, everything with our people back home and in our, foreign lands. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's the same feeling for, the majority of the Korean people, not just me.
That if I'm hearing you, their goal is not necessarily to stay in the United States or Canada or Australia for 30 more years, but their ideal would be to go back to an independent Korean nation.
Yes, that's why, like people that are educated here, they still have a connection over there because of that goal, because of that, you know, the future plan. for most of the Karen. So, but I'm sure it will take time. It's not going to be an easy pathway.